There's no question from public opinion polls that people care a lot about the honesty of the person they're dealing with, whether that's their doctor or their political leader. And yet, it's more complex than that. Often we don't want to know the truth. Do you want to find out that your spouse is cheating on you? Do you want to find out the person that you recommended for a job in your company is embezzling? Do you want to find out that your kids are using heroin? These, of course, are all things that you want to know, but you certainly don't want to know. So it's very complex as to whether or not we really want to catch a liar. We think we do. What if we find out that both of our presidential candidates are lying? Then what do we do? I'm not saying they are. I never comment on anyone in office or running for office. It's only after they're out that they're fair game. Clinton said, "I didn't have sex with that woman," and then gave her name. That woman is putting her at a distance from himself. Now, there are many reasons why people lie, and some are honorable. I study the lies that society cares about catching, generally disapproves of. The most common reason why people lie is to avoid punishment for breaking a rule. Usually, some rules are broken accidentally. You walk down the hallway too fast and you knock over the $2,000 jar that's on the stand. You didn't mean to do that. Did you knock over that jar? Well, you're not going to. Yes, I did. No, I don't know who knocked over that jar. It was knocked over when I walked by. You don't want to get punished. But there are many times where we make the decision, I'm going to break a rule, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to lie about it. I'm not going to admit that I cheated. I don't want to get caught. So the decision to lie is made at the same time, the decision to cheat. When we teach people, and we do in workshops, teach people how to catch liars, it takes us 32 hours. Spotting a microexpression is the single most useful thing. This is an expression that lasts about a 25th of a second. We've tested over 15,000 people in all walks of life, and over 99% of them don't see them. And yet, with an hour's training on the internet, they can learn to see them. However, that may only tell you that the person's concealing an emotion. That's a lie. They're not telling you how they really feel, but it may not tell you that they're the perpetrator of a crime. It's a terrible example, but I have to use it. My wife is found dead. I will be the first suspect because, regrettably, the person most likely to kill their wife is the husband. But I love my wife. I didn't kill her. The police are wasting their time and they're insulting me. Time is going by and they're not looking for the real person. I could be furious at them and concealing my anger. And so if you spot my concealed anger, it doesn't mean I killed my wife. It only means that I'm concealing my anger. Now, if the lie is about how do you really feel, Paul, and you spot a microexpression, then you've got it. Second, realize that only the gestures of your cultural group are you going to recognize. That's body-specific language, but you already know them. You can't, if I asked you how many gestures are used in America today, you'd give me about 12, but there are actually 80. And if I showed you every one of those 80, you'd know what they mean. Now, the one that, amazingly enough, has had an enormous payoff is one of the most common ones we use, which is the head shake yes and no. I just did, this is actually yes, and this is no. but it occurs in a micro fashion. So I worked on the case of an embezzler who had embezzled over $100 million. He was really big time until Bernie Madoff came along. This embezzler had accused people in a number of banks of being in on the deal, which meant those banks would be vulnerable to having to pay for the embezzlement. And when one of the people who he falsely accused, he is asked, "Did she help you steal the money?" He said, "Yes, absolutely she did." Doing a slight head shake, no. Even tinier than mine. So there's a gesture one, there's a face one. There are two things that people want to be able to do to improve their emotional life. You want to be able to choose what you become emotional about and when you become emotional. That's number one. And the second is you want to be able to choose how you act when you are emotional. Well, nature didn't want you to do either. So it didn't give you any tools. So if you're going to learn how to do this, it's going to be hard work, and it isn't going to be the kind of learning like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you learn to ride a bicycle, you can stay off it for 10 years and get right back on and ride. What I'm going to tell you now, if you don't do every day, you'll fall off. You got to practice it all the time. It's like being a concert pianist. It doesn't stick unless you practice it. So, let's take problem number one. Having more choice about what you become emotional about. And that's the only reason we want that is because sometimes we become emotional about things that we don't think merit becoming emotional. Or we act in a way that we don't approve of afterwards. That's the number two problem. The first step is to keep a diary of when you become emotional. Now, you won't know in advance, but you'll surely know when it's over that you just had an emotional episode. Write it down in detail. Do this for a month. Then go through it and look for what are the themes that are causing your emotions. If it isn't apparent to you, get a friend to look at it. But it should be very apparent to you when you read through this diary. And you should be able to identify 3 or 4 redundant things that are again and again getting you to act emotionally. Now, the ones where you think you responded emotionally and there was no reason to be emotional, draw a red circle around them. Now, how many of those have the same theme? Now you're equipped. You know what the triggers are. Now, when you're about to enter a situation, think, is this likely to trigger one of my themes? If so, what can I do? Can I calm my mind? Do a full body scan? Do meditation? Did I not get much sleep last night, so I'm likely to go off? Maybe I better postpone this meeting because it's going to have one of my hot triggers. Or am I in pretty good shape? And I'm prepared and I know what might be coming right down the road. That's step 1 on problem 1. Step 2 is harder. And it is to increase the gap between impulse and action. The way this works, and emotion episodes begin with an appraisal that something is triggering your emotion that's based on your previous life experience, that's stored in what I call your emotional alert database. This diary is trying to find out what's in that database. But this appraisal mechanism is continually scanning wherever you are, looking for any of these triggers. And it's incredibly fast and not always accurate. The moment it clicks on something, an impulse arises. That impulse, if it gets to the circuitry in your brain for a particular emotion, it'll set off the emotion in your expression, your voice, your posture, your words. But it takes time for the impulse to get translated into action. You want to lengthen that time so you can spot the impulse arising before you act. This is not easy. For some people, it's a lot easier for others because they normally have a very slow rise time. And others, so I call the attack dogs, they have almost instant, very little delay between impulse and action. But strangely enough, the only thing that seems to stretch that out is a contemplative practice called mindfulness. And it takes a minimum of about 20 minutes a day and at least 4 days a week if you want to try it. And it'll take about 6 months to start to have an effect, and then it'll only continue if you continue to do it. And you won't always spot the impulse, but sometimes you'll have the wonderful feeling of being able to tell, I am about to get angry. I think I won't. I'll let it go. I'll let that just go right by me. Won't happen all the time, but sometime. So here are the two techniques. One, the trigger diary to find out what's in your emotion alert database. Number two, spreading the time gap between impulse and action. Now we're ready to move to the second and somewhat easier step. How do I become aware of the fact that I'm acting emotionally when I am? There are two things that can ring the bell and let me know that I'm doing it. One is pay close attention to the other person's facial expressions, because they're the recipient of your emotions. You can't see your own face. They see it. But you can see their face, and you can tell how they're reacting, and you can say, oh my God, they're starting to look very disappointed. What am I doing that's so disappointing them? How am I acting? It's one source. Second source, the changes within your body, changes in your musculature, in your respiration, in your sweating, in the temperature of the different parts of your body. They are different, we found, for different emotions. The problem is we pay no attention to them. The exercise of making expressions or being a little Stanislavski actor, recalling past emotional experiences, trying to relive them and focus on what those sensations are. We've got to bring the sensations that are unique to each emotion into consciousness so you'll start to feel it while you're experiencing it. Those are the two steps. It's a lot easier for you to learn how to be more attentive to other people than to learn how to have any choice about what you become emotional about, and to learn to have choice and knowledge of when you're becoming emotional. But it's a good goal, and if you succeed, you'll like yourself better and others will like you better. One of the most amazing discoveries, it completely surprised me, and that's what I like most in research, is when you learn something you didn't know you were going to learn. That's very different from research where you prove something you think you already know. You have to do that too, because maybe you were wrong. But when you discover something you didn't expect, that's really exciting. And what we discovered, published this in more than 20 years ago, made the front page of the New York Times. We didn't kill anybody. What it did was show that if you put on your face one of the universal expressions, you will turn on the physiology of emotion. You will begin to experience that emotion. So the face is not simply a display system that tells you what's happening inside me. I can self-generate any emotion by making the movements on my face. Now, some of them are harder to make than others, and wouldn't you know it, the one that's hardest to make is the one that turns on enjoyment, because a smile alone won't do it. You have to be able to activate one of the muscles around the eyes, and only about 10% of the people we've tested can do it. We are just beginning to use this discovery of how you can self-generate emotion to teach people how to become more aware of what they're feeling at the moment they feel it. Because it is my belief, and I want to underline the word belief because I can't prove this, it's my belief that the way in which emotions evolved, it was to deal with things like saber-toothed tigers, the current incarnation of which is the car that's suddenly lurching at your car at a high speed. You don't have time to think. You have to do and make very complex decisions. Think of what you do to avoid that car. You make, in split seconds, estimates of speed and angle and what you need to do with your feet and your hands. And if you had to think about what you were doing, you'd be dead. So it's a system that evolved to deal with really important things without your thinking about it. So that means that sometimes you're going to be very unconsidered, very thoughtless. Sometimes your emotions aren't going to fit the situation, and you're not even going to know it until someone says to you, "What are you getting so upset about?" And you think, "Oh my God, that's right. I'm really afraid. I don't know why maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I misunderstood the situation." Well, these exercises that we're giving people, moving their facial muscles, concentrating on the sensations that they then experience to make them more aware of an emotion when it arises, so that they will feel it at the moment and then can say, "Did she really mean to ignore me when she put the toast on the table? No. It was just an accident." Or maybe I shouldn't jump to the conclusion that she doesn't care about me at all. Why doesn't she care about me? That whole business. It takes the way in which we can improve our emotional life is to introduce conscious awareness into the process. And that will take practice. And nature did not want you to do that. So you have to do it yourself.